Hey, really great work, Andrew. And uh, at the risk of turning into an advertisement for Note Performer, I just would really strongly recommend trying that out. I think that it would bring your ideas to life a lot more, and also clear up some balance questions that some things that sound out of balance, whether they really are out of balance in your score or not, right? So Note Performer is actually fairly good for that. It's not always completely reliable, but yeah. So there are some areas in this piece where I think that you did some copy paste on a couple of phrases, and you probably have been sitting there listening to the mock up and thinking, oh, geez, I forgot to drop this one thing, or I forgot to change the pitches on that, and so on. So I'll try to point those things out as I go, but yeah, let's start with the beginning here. Just a few little pointers on some scoring tips and so on. Like here, I would say piccolo shouldn't be flute one. It should be flute two, right? It's the auxiliary's job to cover the those instruments. And I'll just take a very quick moment here to explain why. Part of it is just that like the first job is to lead their particular little group in the winds, right? So like the first player gets all of the tough stuff, and like usually all the complex first flute stuff is written out for them, and that's enough for them to study, right? And then the second flute or third flute will cover like alto flute, piccolo, and so on, and that'll really be a specialty for them. So like by giving the first player the piccolo part, not only are you kind of forcing somebody else's role onto them, which they don't mind playing piccolo. There are lots of there's lots of scoring where the first has, or there's occasional scoring where the first has to play piccolo, and they're perfectly happy to do it, right? But they shouldn't be the ones to do it when the second flute player is just playing flute, right? There's also there are also doubling fees involved. So you're basically giving the second flute or third flute player the doubling fee, or you're taking it away from them and you're giving it to the first, and the first has already paid more, right? So there's that little kind of slightly uncomfortable reality. So just thinking about this in terms of being polite to the player, and also just giving them the right instrument. Just try to reverse it next time. It's okay to have the piccolo part on top, piccolo slash flute 2, and then flute 1 below, and then just flip their positions when you go back to flutes 1 and 2. You can just have them share the staff, and you can get rid of the piccolo staff. All right. Okay, so let's talk about evaluation criteria here. There is a concern that I have noted, and it was really for my purposes, but I think that it's something that can, in general, be applied to to everybody's evaluations, just as food for thought, right? Like you don't have to have done what I did, but thinking about these criteria may help you to come back to your material, or think about other jobs that you have in orchestration, and think about applying some of these proportions to them, right? Okay, so the first problem being pitch weight in the upper middle register of the piano. Do we want to stick to that, right? Now, here in the score, you really do stay in that same register. You don't expand out the texture very much at all, right? So it sort of kind of forces this very kind of shrill, more trebly reality onto everything at the beginning. Now, with Note Performer, that won't seem quite as trebly as with the sound set that you're using here. But, not that I really care about sound sets as much, except that I'm just really finding that they're becoming more and more useful in getting work. I mean, I just really have to say it, just to face the reality that has been thrust on us by notation applications using sound sets. And I have gotten jobs because I had a really good mock-up or I have been able to convince somebody that I was working with on a project to expand the work based on the mock-ups that I was giving them. Or I was able to help them to convince the people that they were working with, me as the orchestrator, them as the composer, talking to their director about a particular direction to take with the texture of the music and everything else, because I was able to supply a good mock-up. So, I mean, much as I hate to say it, simulations are starting to have real-world consequences. So that's just my recommendation. No performer's cheap. It's fairly realistic sounding. That's not the same thing as being real. Okay. All right. So just to get back to that criterion, though, it would probably help this to sound fuller, and yet you would still have to face that problem whether or not you wanted to expand things out. Like, you could start by limiting things to where the piano is, and then continuing on, and then come back with a fuller orchestration and just keep it full as you're going on, and then have some textural contrast here, which you do provide, by the way, and I'll talk about that when we get there. So the next question, which relates to that problem, is the thematic material repeating often, possibly sounding repetitive if orchestrated the same way throughout. And I feel that this is something that you might want to work on, because it's not just that these two parts here are identical, it's also that each two-bar motive is identical, right? So it's kind of repeating the same thing 4 times. So, if you are fine with that, then I'm not going to criticize you on that. But, it's just something that you may want to think about, just bringing in some variety. Like I said before, like increasing the scope, and it could be something as simple as just a timpani strike, or like going boom, boom on the first beat, and then have like a kind of like a snarl on the second beat from maybe muted brass, boom, ruff, boom, ruff, right? That might be enough to make enough of a change, right? And that's all you needed to do. Now, just speaking about the scoring of this, it's all fine. I think it's kind of cool, actually. You're really putting a lot of weight there, like the clarinets above. You're putting the clarinets above the flutes, right? Or above the flute. And you're doubling kind of, or you're right below the piccolo, right? So the piccolo is really in its weakest place right in here, like in its first octave. So give the piccolo part to your flute player, right, is what I would say. Just have the flute player play this B, right, the octave higher, since this is octave transposition. You can leave the piccolo there to strengthen that flute part, but if you want a low B right in there, you already have that note coming from first oboe, so you don't really need to double it here, right? I mean, I see what you're trying to do. You want to throw in that EB kind of thing, but there's no reason why the first oboe player couldn't do that. But yeah, but you just need more weight. I mean, you can even hear it in the mock-up. The B is kind of weak, even though it's kind of doubling what's going on here in the first violin. It's just, it just doesn't really have enough support. Just the piccolo all by itself is just not very strong right there. The flute is twice as strong as the piccolo in that register, on those exact pitches. I'm not saying comparative registers like written registers. I'm talking about the actual sounds, right? So the actual sound of the flute at the B an octave higher is twice as strong as the piccolo on that note. Now, one little note here about viola scoring, and that is, if everything is going to be up here in the stratosphere, even though it's all perfectly readable, it really should be a treble clef. It's way more readable. And, especially with this kind of dancing stuff, it's just easier to kind of, figure out where the fingerings are going to go and everything else. I mean, if everything were like, if the upper limit were just 3 ledger lines, I would say, well, you could just leave it alone. But like, you're going up to 4 ledger lines, and it's just more readable in treble clef. And this could also be in tenor clef right in here, all the way through. If you're going up to A a lot, just keep it in tenor clef. All right, So now let's talk about the next criteria of the melodic development soaring quite high and the accompaniment figures covering a wide range. So we've already talked about that. I mean, it's perfectly fine on viola, but I mean, I almost feel like, is there some doubling that could be done here for these viola parts where there's like clarinet or something like that, just to make it a little firmer, because you've got this kind of doubled flute line. Now, admittedly, like both of these parts right in here are kind of going into weaker areas. So I would say maybe the best strategy to do here would be just to back everybody off dynamically, right? So that like the softer sounds are clearer. So you got this massive fortissimo and so on, and then I would say throw in here like maybe if this were mezzo forte and this were like mezzo piano or even piano, right? Just both parts, right? And maybe a little bit of doubling just to make it secure on clarinet. Then I think this would come through really, really great, and you wouldn't have to worry about the middle register being weak. You know, you're giving it this massive fortissimo sound, and it's like kind of a sort of not a very strong register, right? It's carrying the melody all by itself in a place where the violins actually would be way stronger and more, more emphatic sounding. All right, so continuing on, we have the whole like dichotomy, like the between the accompaniment figures, the melodic development, and so on. And I think it's just really interesting the way that this tracks at the octaves. You're sending your first violins all the way up to that high E, and so long as you are happy with that kind of sort of slightly screechy, not quite as musical kind of sound above A, then that's fine. Just score it, score it the way that you want it. But you could also drop down an octave after this A, from the B, and then just use the overtones of the first violins to give the illusion that they'd continued on in unison with the piccolo right there. All right, and I see like you're dropping out here. If you had really wanted to have the oboes play unison all the way up to this E, that's a perfectly playable note, especially in unison with the second violins. Oboe notes playing high, so long as you don't get really above E or F, they're fine when they're doubled with strings. Just they sound great. And once again, here's a place where you could really throw in some tenor clef. Bassoonists love it. They play it all day long. It's totally fine, right? And just sort of keep it. And you could go back to bass clef here, I think, if you wanted to, or keep it in tenor. This low D would be the bottom line of the tenor staff, and that's perfectly readable. I think bassoonists have the strongest tenor clef reading, along with cellists, and trombone players read it all day long. I can't really say one would be weaker, but certainly bassoonists are among the strongest of tenor clef readers. That just there are a lot of parts just sort of take it for granted. They'll have whole parts, like whole pieces, where they're always in tenor clef, especially first bassoon, and that's true of tenor trombone players as well. All right, so now we're getting to this third section in here, where like the new important concern is upper middle register continuing on, and feeling relentless if there's no textural contrast to the previous passage. So, I mean, you don't really change the scope of the accompaniment or anything, or the scope of the overall scoring all that much, right? You're still keeping it pretty much as a transcription up in that upper middle register of the piano. One thing you do have going for you, though, is you're providing a bit of textural contrast, so you have a little bit of a way out, right? But what I would say is, like, if you really want to make it count, also have a contrast in the percussion accompaniment, right? Because it's getting like like when you get to here, you're thinking like, am I being relentless? So what is relentless about this? Is that it's just kind of the same, triangle and tambourine thing going on, right? So I mean, I love the way that the tambourine drops out here. Maybe it could drop out here too, right? Maybe the triangle could be, just withheld because you're not really going to hear it very much here, and then bring it in here, right? So trading off between tambourine, triangle, triangle, and then just leave these guys out and throw in some timpani, right? Boom, dun dun dun, boom da 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 dun, boom da 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 dun. I mean, there's like a bunch of different things that you could do in here, but like expanding the sound picture, I would say the scope of the sound picture could be a real strength right in there. But I mean, there's nothing all that wrong about the way that this is scored. I think it's very, very cool. Yeah, I really like what you're doing in here. That's very neat. So now we go to this next screen, and I'm just gonna like point out a few things. Like there are some wrong notes in here. Like there should be a B flat in there, and so on. So like maybe like just watch out what I do in my template. Even though I did get one note wrong in one of the templates, which was a B natural instead of a a B flat. I accidentally put in instead of a B natural right around here. Okay, but in general, I'm just seeing a few wrong notes here and there that are just by copy pasting the template. I think you get the right thing, and then like B sharp right in here. That's a little strange. So anyway, so let's stick to our evaluation criteria, and starting off with the concern about maintaining a driving staccato and transitioning into the next passage. I think you do that pretty well. And I like the real sense of directness here, right? And we have the simultaneous concern about the so I'm having a slight problem here with my other computer. Okay. The simultaneous concern about the high interjecting notes and trying to keep them from becoming too glaringly repetitive, right? And you sort of solve that problem by, it's like you sort of push with the brass right in here, so that E becomes part of it, right? I'm not sure if it's as successful right in here, right? But then you have that, like the little secondary one right in here. I think that works great. So that concern is all right. It's done well. Okay, and then right in here saying atu, I would throw in some staccato in here. Yeah, right, just to kind of keep that sense of nimbleness going. Okay, and then right in here, beyond, da 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 da. Yeah. Just to point out that if the clarinet were playing this here, or clarinets were playing this, A2, then you'd have just a really direct, forceful sound, right? So here you have forte, two parts, oboes, doubling, and so they get that really kind of warm, bright sound in the doubling. And then here, like, I mean, it's totally playable. It's a little honky in the oboe, but it's still playable, right? But I'm not sure that it has as much power or as much directness as, say, the clarinets playing Chalumeau register, right? This would be a Chalumeau register for the clarinets. So just a suggestion there. Yeah. Now here you're saying two flute, and at this point, the two staves could just be one staff, right? All right. So that, maintaining differentiated roles and closely spaced melodies, overlapping accompaniment figures, I mean, more or less, you are accomplishing that here. And we're kind of going to the whole place where we've got the very emphatic melody, bum 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 da da dum, and keeping the triplets from overwhelming the melodic line, and that's not a big concern because you've got the doubling from bassoon and atu horns, and you've also got like this, all this weight on this sounding G, the D, written D in the horn. And I think it's kind of cool how you change the strings to a harmonic element here, and you allow these instruments to sort of play out. All right, I think that is just such a cool idea. And then you kind of repeat the same thing here. So yeah, the one thing I think you should possibly think about here, and you are also having nice the widely reaching left hand patterns. That's all fine to keep here in the double basses, and a little touch of accompaniment from the tuba. Imagine if you had a contrabassoon just kind of hitting these low E's right at the end of every bar. Okay, about the only thing that I would say about it is as you progress forwards, do we want to kind of keep this style for as long as it goes? And you're just kind of turning the page. It really sort of stays where it is and kind of gets softer and softer. We lose the accompaniment of the horns, and I'm wondering if you could have maybe kept the bassoon going, and then dropped out, right, so that it wouldn't be quite so abrupt. It really does feel sort of abrupt going to the mezzo piano and everything else, right? So it could be a more gradual change. So if you really are going to stick with that, right? So, or could you have approached this with a trading off from melody instrument to melody instrument, right? Maybe dovetailing on the downbeat of every 4 bars. So it's just some things to think about. So, all right, so we get to right here, and sort of food for thought here. When the pianist is playing this, right? They put their foot on the gas. In other words, they play the pedal and they slow down and they get louder as they go upwards. And each of those pitches that they play holds on and sustains going into the next bar. So basically you're just kind of adding pitches as you go up and they all kind of hold on, right? And also we have a sort of a missing ritardando here, or or rallentando. And I feel that so that's something else that's needed right in here, right? Because it's an allargando expansion. You're just kind of saying, hey, and now there's this other thing, right? So I think when it just keeps the same speed and you just kind of have separated notes in a row, we kind of don't have that sense of the music just opening up, blooming like this big flower all of a sudden. And then, and then where do you go from there? Then you get the scene change to this doppio più lento. So that would be one thing that I would sort of pick apart in this, and I'd also say I don't know how effective the real buzzy sounds of the lower winds right in here and the trombones and everything like that, as they are not doubled by any string sounds at all. Also, it just feels really exposed, right? But that's if that's the style that you want to go with, that's fine. But the strings are kind of not doing anything until just the very last eighth note, more or less, except for just a little bit of E down there. There, with divisi and everything else, you could cover every single note as you go up, doubling from the strings. But that's a huge amount of weight. 2 trombones on this D right here. And that it sort of doesn't really appear to be, just kind of looking at the overall scope. You're sitting on that 7th, right? But the note that would really bring out the the harmonic meaning would be more like the major third, the G sharp, right? All right. And also it's a little late, right? Shouldn't the D be on the beat 1.5? So maybe that was a mistake. I don't know. All right. So we're getting to this next section here. Careful treatment of the melodic voice to make it feel authentic to the composer's style, right? So I would say, yeah, sure, throwing in molto espressivo solo trumpet. That's fine. That's great. That feels authentic, and I like this forte piano B flat octave. That's cool, but I'm not so convinced by the horn. It's just like it's like with this cushion in the background piano. It just feels really kind of intrusive, right? Rather than kind of being that wonderful sort of pacing in the background. The other criterion for this passage is keeping accompaniment pattern from becoming too regular and therefore predictable. Sort of just like, oh yeah, there it's coming again and going back and forth and so on, right? So like that tends to sort of suck away some of the excitement and magic from the solo, right? And here's where like people throw in harp, I think, to really good effect, or like just kind of having just sort of little mixtures of measured tremolo in strings and kind of trading off or little patterns from the winds and so on and so forth. So you might want to re-examine this a little bit. I just feel that it's a little too paced, right? We kind of, it feels like it's walking here rather than shuddering with ecstasy, right? So you maybe think about revisiting this, right? Or in other orchestrations that you do in the future, right? Or maybe introducing harp or some other kind of thing. Because the horn is it's such a kind of a dense instrument, right? It really has this fullness of tone, and when it's given jobs like this to do, of the kind of just sort of background pacing, it just really tends to be incredibly solid. So like the same pitches could have been covered by bassoon and staccato, with like a lighter touch, a lighter tread, right? Okay, then like my next concern is the little reaction from the accompaniment, right? Um, but and then there's this really cool thing in the piano part, like and so that's like here, it's kind of underpowered, right? There isn't any doubling, there isn't any staccato, there isn't any emphasis on it, and then the reaction to the second little phrase, which by the way I really love in horn. I think it's cool. So the energy of this da 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 thing at the end, it really sets up the downbeat for the next bar each time, right? And especially here where you have the rise up, ba bum bum da 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 dum. So without that, you'll see what I mean. Just look at the original piano score, like in the left hand part. You see like the 16th notes, like the pattern that's in there. Really, I think you can't really take that out. I think you just really have to have the sense of activity and nimbleness, right, to sort of keep the life going in here, and also being aware that there's the end of this kind of little codetta pushes right into the next phrase. So I'm sort of looking at two screens at once. Sorry, but yeah. You have a diminuendo to piano here, and then you have a push to forte, right? So just watch out. It's like here you've got the push, but it sort of ended up going really soft, and then so I just think you're losing the sense of energy right in there. So watch out for that. Now here, this is also a strategy that I took as well, and that is to have flute up there. See. So here you got piccolo, flute 1, and flute 2, right? So here you could just go to a single staff, right? Flute 1 and 2, and then just you have more headspace. You have more, you've got more vertical room in your score. And we have similar functions here. We have the bassoon. I can see why you held off on the bassoon. Like, you didn't want to put it in where the horns were, but like maybe this is where the clarinet could come in, right? So there, yeah. I'm just still a little worried about the horn feeling a little too solid in its accompaniment. And this is all beautiful, And then we're getting into a section where, we need to manage the sense of restraint, leading to a burst of energy. Yeah, I'm wondering if there could be like kind of a conversation here, rather than just one instrument taking all of the solo time. Whether it could be talking to the oboe or to the clarinet player, just sort of trading off little bits of solo. Right, and then coming back in, and that would sort of help when you're coming in with this trumpet part. It doesn't feel just so sudden, right? To have this other voice. Really nice. The pizzicato right in there. Very, very cool. Right, and yeah. Yeah, so that's all fine. Right. It's sort of strange though, the timpani right in here. Boom da da da, boom da da da, boom da da da. Yeah, I'm just wondering if the timpani could have been more present in other parts where like a certain emphasis could have been used. So yeah. So anyways, those are my thoughts on this score. I think that you have got like the general sense of what you want to do is actually pretty strong, right? And I'm just offering suggestions here and there. And it's not like in the overall approach, there's nothing that's really wrong or bad or unapt or whatever like that. It's just like certain things that you sort of need to tune up, right, in order to make it ready for the stands, I would say. Yeah, there was something about this page, and I can't remember what it was. But, oh yeah, it's right here. Like, I think, just watch out about copy pasting, right? Because, yeah, so these, yeah, it's, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm very quickly proofing your score. Okay. Yeah. So, um, yeah. So there's something wrong right in here. This is. I don't think that this is supposed to be. Sorry. I probably shouldn't do this, but anyways, there's something wrong in here, so you need to fix it. I won't go on any further in that, but yeah, not so sure if this is as seamless as it might be. The trade-off from bassoon to cello, maybe connect that a little bit more smoothly. Yeah, and you know, there may be parts that would work better staccato rather than slurred. And definitely you're going to need some kind of articulation style here to guide the trumpet player a little bit better. If you're going to give him or you're going to give them a row of accents here, then maybe you need some staccatos in there and so on. Anyways, so very cool score, Andrew. So thanks so much for sending this in and being a part of this year's orchestration challenge. Just really, really cool to look at a score like this and see a lot of the stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on below the surface, even though some of the orchestration seems fairly simple on the face of it. You really are thinking about a lot of different things as you're going along, and I appreciate that. And I wish I could focus a little bit more. I had time to focus a little bit more on what is right about a score, rather than just picking apart all these little suggestions of how to fix it. You know what I mean? But with that said, it's still very cool and really, really enjoyable to look at and to look over. And I really do appreciate you being part of the crowd who are helping this challenge be possible this year. It just really amazes me. I mean, we are we have the toughest job in show business, being musicians and performers and composers are like they're the toughest subset of them all, of the toughest job of musician. And the fact that you guys are able to help me help other people get better at it, I mean, that is a act of kindness, altruism, however you want to put it, that humbles me. So thank you very much, Andrew. Thanks for all the supporters of the channel, and for everybody watching this and leaving comments and being part of the whole experience of this. It just could not exist without. I mean, especially as people are sending me more and more scores, there is no way that I could keep going with this without that kind of positive energy and people helping each other. That's what makes it worth it to me. So thanks all. This is sort of the end of a very long day of evaluating things for me, but I just feel so energized and feel ready to just jump into another day tomorrow and evaluate another huge pile of really interesting scores. See you all really soon.